Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we talked about the current debate going on here in South Korea on whether to abolish the Ministry of Gender, Equality, and Family and what that really means for women. Well, on a related note, we do have a new CEO of Korea's #1 search engine called Naver, and it's not only going to be the second female ever to hold the CEO post of Naver, her immediate predecessor was the first female, but she's also only 40 years old, and so she is representative of this push for a younger generation to take more leadership and executive functions to reform the business culture in Korea, which apparently, even in the tech world, is still rife with the old way of doing things. And I can't believe I missed this, but probably it was because we were really concerned with the SJM crisis last year in May and June. Well, that is when somebody from Naver actually, and he was in his 40s, decided to pass on into another world. He self-offed himself because of the incessant workplace bullying. And so this new CEO that stepped in this week has been charged and has pledged to change the workplace culture over at Korea's #1 search engine and tech company. So Naver, if you've never heard of it, well, if you come to Korea, you better get that Naver app onto your phone. Although now I kind of want to boycott it because it sounds a little shady. But Naver, Naver. Why was it called Naver? Well, in Korean it's Naver. And when it first started, it was very blog centric. So when you did the searches for your questions, you most often got a blog from a real person, although now it's kind of manipulated where people are paid to pretend they're real, but it was supposed to be trusted advice on the internet that you could get as if you were asking a neighbor. So neighbor as in, my neighborhood friend or welcome to the neighborhood. Neighbor, and it being Koreanicized and then turned into kind of a cool tech name was Naver, Naver. So that's where the name comes from. It has dominated Korea's search engine, and right now, I believe it's probably lost a bit of market share because Google has soared, but right now it has about 64% market share in Korea, Google 28%, Daum, another rival of Naver a long time ago, but now it's dropped to 6.8%, and the others are 1%. Just to give you a comparison, in the US, it's like 88% Google, 6% Bing, and 3% Yahoo, and others 3%. And so Naver, when I first, oh my gosh, long time ago when I came to Korea, I was frustrated by those search results because I didn't want a blog. I don't want to ask a neighbor because, sometimes a neighbor's information is not right and they take way too long to get to the point. And it was especially in the sense that I really just wanted the address of probably the restaurant or store that I was trying to find and a phone number. I can't tell you how many blogs I had to scroll through all the way down to the bottom to see if somebody left a contact information, and there was no contact information. Now it's a little bit different because they have accelerated the map function, and so now you'll see if you are typing in a place and you just want the address, you just want the phone number, well, you still have to scroll down underneath the blogs because they're still being loyal to that algorithm tradition that they've had, but at least you'll finally get the address, phone number, and a link to the map. The reason why I bring up the map is because the big bully in this situation, and yes, this video is about workplace bullying, the guy was in charge of the maps. Yeah. So before we get there, let's talk about what happened? So apparently last spring, it was at the end of May, a 40-something-year-old worker at Naver basically self-offed himself because of incessant workplace bullying. The police said that there was no foul play. There was even a note that he left that named the people that were persecuting him, and one was a very high-level executive, the one that was in charge of the whole Naver Maps project. And so this really opened the door to an investigation by the media and by the labor union and by the government into Naver's corporate practices. And I actually want to say around that time, I did go to Naver on a separate trip, like, one of those things where it was sort of like by invitation for a networking thing, and we got a view of the offices, a tour. Their library is amazing. It's like full of greenery. I mean, I thought like, oh, how cool. And it is located in Korea's Silicon Valley, which is Pangyo Techno Valley. And let's say without traffic, maybe about 30 minutes by car down south of Seoul. And there's a lot of tech companies there, gaming companies, and of course Naver and Kakao is also there. And just walking around that area, it felt like it was like maybe like a Google campus, or it was on Silicon Valley. And I had hope in my heart. I was like, wow, look at all these people who are working in the Korean tech space. They were like, the average age was more millennial. And I was like, okay, well, there's hope in Korea, because it seems as if they're probably not in these abusive hierarchical environments. And when we did get tours of these tech companies, they did tout how different they did business and how the workplace culture was more egalitarian. Even over at Naver, they did say that, but Kakao really stressed that. They said that actually they don't even call people by their Korean names. They actually all have to get an English name so that it's more of a flat organizational structure, so that everybody can call each other by names instead of like a hierarchical position. Because in the Korean workforce, more often than not, you don't actually call somebody by their name. So maybe in a formal US environment, you'd say, Mr. Smith, but then they would probably be like, oh, just call me Bill. So in Korea, though, you almost don't even say their name. If you say their name, there's actually something wrong. If you're saying like, like if their name is Sunghoon Shi or Sunghoon, and then you have to put Nim. If you use she, that's really rude apparently. But you don't even get that far. You basically call them by their title, if they're the manager or if they're the VP or if they're an associate. So you basically, it's as if you're saying like, yes, Mr. Smith, manager. Like, it's a little bit odd, but basically that reinforces where people are on the totem pole. And so, at least with Kakao, they were saying like, we don't do that. Well, apparently over at Naver, it doesn't matter, because there was this huge workplace bullying scandal. And I would say that in general, Naver would probably get, in my quick estimation, after learning about this case and trying to convey it to you, not like a total failing grade, because it was more so that there was this one extremely abusive executive that came into the company. He was a real horror, apparently. Then he had actually left the company. He went to a gaming company, I think it's like in the neighborhood, for 2 years. So I believe it was from 2017 to 2019, he went to this gaming company, and then he got hired back to Naver by the COO in 2019. And when employees heard that this Voldemort was coming back, they, in droves, went to the COO and said, look, we can't have him back here. He was a nightmare. why are you bringing him back here? But the COO was like, hey guys, like, trust me, I'll take responsibility. If he's up to those things again, I'll take responsibility. And ultimately he did. He had to resign after somebody offed himself, but it was only after somebody offed himself. So before this guy returned in 2019, the COO had like this all hands meeting and was like, oh, we're gonna bring this guy back in, but you guys rest assured he's not gonna be bullying. He's not gonna, like, it's gonna be cool. Apparently it's not gonna be. It wasn't cool at all, because verbal abuse, physical abuse, ostracization, excluding this worker, overworking this worker, making him work at nights, making him work on vacations, and pretty much making this guy's life a living hell. We have other employees at Naver corroborate the account, so there were other witnesses there. But even before all of this happened, there were departures of other workers and also reports to management, especially back to that COO, saying like, look, dude, you said that it was going to be okay. It's not cool right now. And the COO was just like, yeah, well. And then when this happened, where somebody actually decided to self-off themselves, then they took it a little bit more seriously. There was an anonymous survey done at Naver, and it showed that over half of the employees reported that they were being bullied. Think about that. In a tech company that's supposed to be super progressive. Then they had to, yes, let that executive go, and apparently he was making like $380,000 a year, and the COO eventually left that summer of last year. And then in November of last year, the CEO, the first female CEO, decided to, I guess, step aside, and they named a new CEO then, who is now the current CEO. And I guess they were doing a transition period between November and March. And so after the shareholder meeting that happened in March, they decided to then fully put in this new 40-year-old CEO. Apparently she has like a law degree from Harvard, law degree from Yonsei, and went to Seoul National University for undergrad. So I don't know, has she been like in school longer than working? But apparently she has like this business consulting expertise. So it makes me think that maybe I didn't really look her. It's because this video is not about her. I didn't really look up like exactly where she worked, but sounds like she probably went the consulting route or something like that, and she's now gonna try to reform the organizational culture over at Naver. But it is gonna be difficult, because you may think that it is the bully's fault, and it is the bully's fault, but the bully cannot survive unless the environment allows him to survive. And that is essentially what kind of culture you have. But when culture, when you really think about it, is essentially the beliefs, values, and systems of what people think of as normal that is in somebody's mind, that you can't just change somebody's perception. Like what people are willing to put up with as normal essentially determines how fertile of a soil it is for a bully to take root. And if they're at least, that's why I say Naver is not like completely at fault, because there were people who did speak up. There were people who did try to go through the proper channels and management. There were people who warned the COO not to let this Voldemort back in, otherwise it's going to destroy the business. But there is a critical thing missing that I found when people in the workplace cannot counter a bully. And they are missing the essential point. What sort of leverage does that bully have with either somebody at the organization or for the organization as a whole? There usually is something where the bully is presenting as like, with only me, you can get something that is a big prize, essentially like maybe a profit margin or a project or a connection that sounds too good to pass up, usually too good to be true, but usually what they make it seem like is that they are the irresistible offer that you cannot forego and you must overlook the dysfunction because the prize that they're promising to deliver is just so valuable to you. Now, this is totally my surmising, but if he was head of the map division, and if we look back in history over how when Google tried to enter the Korean market and also got bullied, they were targeted especially for their location data when they were trying to build up the maps. Because, you know, when you came to Korea and you try to find places with Google Maps, it did not work very well. So they were really focusing on building up the location data. And for some strange reason, the government really honed in on Google and attacked it for like breaching privacy or something like that. It really did look like somebody was weaponizing the laws like a competitor was to try to stifle Google's entry into the market. And who else would do that except the #1 search engine that was probably, you know, sweating in their boots? Naver. So I don't know if he was involved in that, or I don't know if he promised that he was going to do something like, you know, more in that regard, but I kind of get the sense that essentially perhaps either it was that or something else where he was offering where I am so important, or he could have been involved in some sort of corruption tied to somebody in the executive suites and had some sort of leverage. That's essentially how the bully works, unless it's on other levels, which maybe I'll get into with my own personal story. And so that created a real ruckus, and there was even a memorial at Naver for this employee, and other tech employees from other companies that had nothing to do with Naver, but they were in the neighborhood, came by and paid their respects. So that to me signals that there are a lot of problems even in other tech companies, even if it's supposed to be the more progressive element in workplace cultures here in Korea. And they did confirm this. The company where that crazy executive had taken a 2-year hiatus in between his Naver posts was Netmarble, which is like one of Korea's top gaming companies. And they interviewed some employees there and they said like, yeah, he was a horror here as well. And he would do crazy things like, yeah, shout, yell, but then he would do a weird punching thing into your stomach. Like perhaps it wasn't as like, you know, strong of a thing where you could basically say like he punched me, but essentially it was like a push punch, like really kind of antagonizing and intimidating, and then also like messing with people's heads and hair. Like that is in Korea, if you touch somebody's head, it is super disrespectful. So just, you know that it's not even about the hair. It's literally about like, yeah, if it is a sign of a huge disrespect. And so he was already reported at Netmarble doing these things, but then they opened up other investigations into other gaming companies, and there's just like, you know, stuff rife everywhere. So again, if you are dealing with workplace bullying, it really is about the people who are around the bullying situation and how they respond that really does reflect the workplace culture. You can always have like a bad hire, you could always have somebody who is a horrible person, and they are the problem. Yes, they are the source of the problem, but actually the real problem is the reaction of the people in the room. If you just let it happen, then actually I would say you're even the bigger criminal. It's literally watching somebody get attacked and literally their life taken away from them and you just not doing anything about it. And that speaks volumes as to what kind of workplace environment you have. Why? Is it fear? Is it because of indifference? Is it because you also participate? But the people who try to speak up and how they're met with resistance or acceptance is a huge indicator of where your organization is. If they speak up and they're stifled, that's horrible. I think you should leave. However, if you still want to keep fighting, you gotta fight smart. And again, like I said, you instead of going after like, oh, this is such a bad person, this is such, horrible, effects. Usually you're going to talk about how it is affecting you. Unfortunately, companies probably they kind of don't care about that. And they kind of don't care about your rational arguments of probably why this is hurting the performance of the company, the department, the project. Why? Because they have been sold a lie by the bully, or there is some leverage that the bully has where siding with the bully is going to create more rewards for that executive personally or the company as a whole than listening to your concerns. And obviously, if you have teams of people complaining about this bully, leaving the company about the bully, and not having a response by the company, either that COO was beholden to that executive for some reason that we don't know, or that executive was so good at convincing the COO and the management team that he can deliver something that they really, really, really needed. Now that is what you have to isolate, and that is what you have to focus on in order to deleverage the bully. You isolate who up at the top, because usually these are the like narcissistic psychopaths who like suck up to the top and then abuse the bottom. So find who is giving them that leverage in the top management. Find what promise that they have made that really underpins and they depend on and you can tell if you're onto the right track if it's an area that they will fight to the death to defend, because they have to depend on that performance indicator or that win in order for them to stay there, or at least show some sort of progress to keep the con going, because usually they can't deliver it. And then you try to starve the bully out. Try to make sure that more people are not going to feed his performance and feed his dysfunction. And this is just kind of a neutral way to respond to a bully where you're not going to, fight back, engage, and all that stuff. But I also think if you actually decide that you're going to make the ultimate sacrifice of yourself in order to escape, if you're going to do that, which I think nobody should do that, but if you're going to do that, then why not have some fun on the way out and show the bully some resistance, show the bully some problems? It makes no sense to me that the bullies just aren't offered a lot of pushback, and that is what keeps them going. Of course, I understand if you have been bullied like this, your whole mental state has been so degraded down to a point where you're not gonna really want to fight. So I totally understand that. But this, I thought, only happened in like more of like the big conglomerates, because one of my friends who was a lawyer, she worked at one of the big conglomerates, and it was like the legal department, right? So fancy lawyers, but there was one horrible guy there, and then there was one person who was being bullied for so long that on his last day, and he was a hire as an expat, so he was going to go back to the States. And then I guess like on the last day, and then like a few days before he was going to even leave the country, he tracked down his bully outside the office. Actually, he was following him for like days, like doing like reconnaissance of like his movement patterns, and then he beat him up. He beat the guy up, and then I guess in a few days he left the country. But does it have to come down to that where like you can't do anything until you like leave the country? I think there are many more creative ways that you can do on even a daily basis if you really want to stand up to bullies. Just meditate and think of something. And if you want to maybe perhaps spice up your day, instead of being so beaten down by the bully, really focus on either getting out of there or making sure that you are protecting other people if you're not the target, because that is not going to be a conducive atmosphere for your growth and potential anyway. So Naver says that they're going to form a task force to figure out how to do this organizational redesign. And I was just like, okay, there you go again. You're going to try to solve top-down insular hierarchical management with a top-down insular committee to figure. You go do it. You try it. Yeah. Give it a shot. But really, you have to empower people to protect themselves, because everybody has some sort of self-protection mechanism. So you have to make sure that they are empowered to protect themselves. Because what are you going to do? You're going to instead of running the company, you're just going to babysit everybody, and then everybody's going to have to come to you and being like, look, this person is this person bit me. This person shoved me. This person, let people, they're adults, protect themselves. And then the ones who can't protect themselves as well, empower the ones who are a little bit more outspoken and will try to protect others. Because one of the most frustrating things that I had with my own personal experience with, bullying in a Korean workplace culture is that if you're the one trying to help and do the reforms, actually you get targeted as being kind of like the troublemaker, or the favorite line I heard was oh, that's such American thinking. Oh, come on. There are tons of people who are Koreans who don't want bullying. They speak out about bullying. They fight bullying. And let me remind you, not a lot of independence fighters in Korea. The reason why we even have Korea back from colonization is people were speaking up and willing to fight for things. So don't call it just American style thinking. I mean, that is another tactic that they use to try to gaslight you into silence. But I remember some of these things are really childish in the workplace. I remember we were going live on air, and my co-anchor basically put pins and needles all under my seat, to hurt and stab me while we were doing the broadcast. I was just like, girl, so immature. I just collected the needles and after the broadcast on my script, and then just quietly, resolutely dumped it so that everybody could see what I was cleaning up into the trash can, and just left. There's no reason to engage with those types of people, especially when they kind of plot their own demise. So this is also another tactic for the bully, is they're always doing something shady. And so you try to figure out what the shady thing is. And gosh, in this place, she was just opening her legs to married men, and especially one of these producer camera guys who was actually one of the better ones. And so she wanted to monopolize his time and talent so that she could just get always the best camera work and editing and production and whatnot. And they would edit together, and married. He was totally married with a child, and they would go out for, I guess, a dinner break that was really long, I don't know, maybe 3 hours or something like that. But then, when she came back, girl, we can smell the douche, okay? We can smell the douche. And maybe it was kind of not necessary. Maybe it was a dinner and a date at a motel. There were a lot of them around the office. So there's always something shady that somebody is doing. And so just keep your eyes peeled and don't feel like you are so deleveraged all the time when there is a bully in the office, because either you can leave, and you should make sure you leave that situation, but try to speak up. And if your organization does not allow for speaking up, then I guess you got to go somewhere else. Of course, in Korea, I think the reason why people feel stuck is that they're like, well, this is like everywhere. There's like no place to go. It'll just be the same thing regardless. Well, if nobody starts, then you're just going to have to just wallow in pain for the rest of your life then. I mean, somebody has to join the efforts and somebody has to start, somebody has to continue. Anyhow, so does that change your view of Naver? I'm just like, geez, like, okay, well, you know, Kakao Maps actually, I think, works better than Naver Maps anyway. And for all those years, Naver, that you made me scroll through blogs just to try to find a phone number, well, maybe this is just on you, because I'd rather use Google and Kakao, although the Naver dictionary is really good. Oh, Naver Pay is pretty good. I mean, come on, like Naver is a good company. They have like great products, and I'm sure the other people even who worked on the Maps team are good people. So we shouldn't like totally abandon them, but this definitely does affect how consumers see and react and use your products. And of course, it's like all advertising based, and your advertising rates are way too expensive. You are totally taking advantage of everybody in the country. So who knows? Maybe this is a little bit of karma. Lower those advertising rates. Maybe you'll get a little bit more market share back from Google, although Google's expensive too. So if anybody asks, you know, if you're kind of like coming to Korea and it's just like, what is this Naver thing? Well, that's the Naver thing, and that's the Naver drama. So make sure you like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, guys.
Tune in next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Love you.